Right, so welcome to the SEM V guide from Arturia. And on this one, we will cover pretty much every single knob, every single function this synthesizer can do. So this is a guide, this is not a review, right? So we're going to cover all of this and learn how to use the synthesizer. Now, of course, if you find this useful, remember to subscribe and to, provide a like. Just leave a like right there at the bottom. And if you have the money, you can go to Patreon and support the channel. So we are going to start with the oscillators and this sub. So right here, we will always start from a default patch. So by default, of course, right here, you have the VCO1 and the VCO2, and you can go 24 semitones up and 24 down, right? Pretty straightforward. And if you want to go in the, the notes in between, you can right click and you can go in cents, in small amounts. And by double clicking, you're going to go always back to the 0 semitones. Now, the thing is that how can you provide volume for the VCO1 and the VCO2? So they are right here at the bottom. They are the controls. This is the mixer. And by default with VCO1 and VCO2, what you can do is saw and pulse. You cannot do anything else. It's just a saw and a pulse. Now, when the knob is right here at the middle, it means that you have no output. So nothing will happen. Of course, you get a little bit of digital noise right there, but nothing happens. So you will need to go either to the saw all the way to the left or the pulse all the way to the right. So if I go right here, and we are going to be using just right now the VCO1, we get a saw. If you go to the other way, we get a pulse, right? Same thing for the oscillator number 2. If I go to oscillator number 2, we get a saw or we get a pulse, and right in between, we get nothing. So notice that you can go in betweens, It's going to be a little bit quieter, but right there, full volume and a little bit quieter. So you also get a sub right here at the control. You get the external, but it's going to be sub. And this is the sub you have right here. We're going to talk about this in a minute. Or you can do noise, right? So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I believe I don't need to spend a lot of time explaining this. Now, of course, what you get right here is the sync control. Because both oscillators are pretty much the same, they just have some, you have some differences. Now, when you are on pulse, and I'm going to use the oscillator number 1 right here, you have access to the modulation section, but this works with modulation, with LFOs or envelopes. And we're going to discuss this later. But what you can do when you are on pulse mode, you can modulate, you can change the pulse width manually. So if I, do something, I'm going to be able to change it manually to make it narrow or the other narrow. So you can do the same thing with the other one with the VCO2. It's just completely the same. Right, and everything you have right here in the middle belongs to the modulation section. We're going to talk about this in a minute. Now, one thing you get right here is the sync. Now, if you don't know what sync is, it means that the oscillator number 2 will be in sync with the oscillator number 1. So that's what it means. It's a pretty classic type of, thing on pretty much any kind of synthesizer. So, for example, if I enable both oscillators, and I'm going to go saw on both, I play something and we get both oscillators, right? Now, by default, on a default patch, this one is going to be a little bit detuned. And if you right click and you just make a little bit of detune, you're going to get that sound, which is cool. But right here, we want to talk about the sync. So when I do sync, for now, I'm just going to start off. I'm going to go and do something like this. And of course, we hear a detuned sound. It sounds very detuned because, of course, the oscillator number 2 is detuned. Now, the sync, remember, it will sync the oscillator number 2 and make it follow the oscillator number 1. So the oscillator 2 will be forced to follow the 1. And now, if I play something, they are in tune, right? Nothing sounds out of tune. And this is what it means. Now, the oscillator number 2, it's a slave of the oscillator number 1, the VCO1, which is the master. So we are not going to get out of tune. But the magic happens if I double click and go back and we do the same thing. We get that kind of a phasey sound. It's not that nice. Now the magic happens when you start changing the frequencies of the oscillator number 2. You're going to get You know, a very cool sound for leads, for example. Right, so that's when the magic happens. Now, when you are on sync, something really cool happens when you use the modulation section to modulate the frequency of the oscillator number 2. But that, kind of belongs to the modulation section. We're going to get there in a minute. So I'm going to go back to a default patch. We always start in a default patch, and we are going to talk about the VCF. So this one is pretty cool, actually. You can, of course, cut frequencies right here with the frequency, the cutoff. You can add resonance, which is going to be adding a bump right here at the breakpoint. Right, so pretty simple. And then you have these options. They belong, of course, to the modulation section. And then you have the mixer, which we already talked about. But right here, you can select different types of filters. By default, of course, is going to be the low pass. Now, when you're right here and right in the middle, right there, you're in the notch right here. And notice it gives you right here how much you're doing. So right now we are on 100% notch. And I want you to look at the spectrum. Now, if I go all the way down to the resonance, what the notch means is that it's going to create this tiny bump in a kind of a negative way. And of course, if we move the frequency, it's going to move that notch. Now, this works along with the resonance. If you go up in resonance, that notch is gonna, go back or go up. So you are pretty much getting, not much. So you need to use it along with the resonance. So then you get the HP, which is the high pass mode. And this one, what it will do, it will cut the low frequencies. There we go. We are cutting low frequencies. Pretty simple. You can, of course, do the resonance and it will add a bump right there. So then we have another, just a different mode, which is going to be the band pass. And if I do something like this and go back to, to resonance nothing and go up, notice that what's going to happen. So this is like the opposite of the notch. It's creating kind of a curve right there. Can you see it? So if I maybe go there, we can see the curve. So this one works again best with the resonance. If you provide resonance, that curve, gets more, we get more. And of course, you're going to get a more audible type of effect. Right, so that's, that's the VCF. So I'm going to go to a default patch again, and everything, it was very simple to understand. Now we need to talk about the envelopes, and then we are going to talk about, the different things we can do with the LFOs and the modulations we have right here. So you get two different envelopes. Now the first one, this one, is going to be the amp envelope. This one will control the volume that comes out of the synthesizer. So right now we are always on a default patch. So if I go attack, the volume will kind of slowly ramp up, and we can see slowly going up. Now with some synthesizers, modern synthesizers nowadays, you get HDSR or maybe ADSR. None of this one. On this one, you get attack, decay, and sustain, right? Just like a mock. So you don't get it. You don't get the release. So the attack is going to be how long it will take it to to get to full amplitude. Then the decay, how long is going to take from, and I'm going to go no sustain for now. How long is going to take to go down to 0. And then the sustain is going to be, of course, if you want to sustain that at some point. If I do something like that, notice it goes up very slowly, it goes down slowly, and then it stays at some point because you're sustaining. And of course, this is a time, and this is a kind of a level. Right? Because it takes a certain amount of time to go up, a certain amount of time to go down, and then you're just leaving at that level. Right. So then you get the envelope number 2. Now the envelope number 2, it's pretty special for us. And I'm going to go all the way down right here and all the way up on the sustain. Now the envelope, this one works for modulation pretty much. We have for modulation purposes. And this one, it's kind of already linked, pre-wired to the envelope number 2. So if we wanted to do some kind of a modulation with the frequency, the attack, decay, and sustain, this envelope is just going to let us do it. So if I go modulation, notice that we can go negative and positive. We're going to talk about this in a second. I'm gonna go right there and provide a little bit of sustain. Notice that we can see that motion. I'm gonna go no sustain. And now if I go a little bit of attack, we are gonna see this frequency moving up and then going all the way down. So it goes up and then goes down very fast. Right, let me do a little bit of resonance. Right, so of course we are doing a slow-ish attack. Let me go slower. And now of course it's going very fast down. So this is because we have no decay. So it's super fast going down. So maybe I want to do a long decay. So we're going to go up slowly and go down slowly. I'm going to go and do more. Now, of course, the sustain works just like the amp. If you want to stay somewhere in between, you're going to need to provide some sustain. Now it's going up, it's going down, but it's just staying right here. It's just, you know, not dying. Now, if you go all the way up on the sustain, you're kind of disabling the decay. Notice that there is no decay. It's just going up and never goes down. And, you know, these are just basic ADSR, in this case ADS controls, but maybe if you're just starting, this is your first synth, and I'm just giving you a little bit more explanation in this one. But this is what you can do. Now, the next thing is going to be talking about LFOs, and then we're going to go and talk about the modulation section we have right here, this knobs. So now we have this LFO, which is the LFO number 1, and then we have another LFO, which is the number 2. So the LFO, of course, is low frequency oscillation, and we can modulate things with this one. Now, the LFO 1, by default, it's very simple. It can go and do a sine wave. That's the only thing it knows how to do. It's just a sine wave. It cannot do a square. It's just a sine wave. And the only thing you can change about the LFO number 1 is going to be how fast it goes. So, for example, if I go right here and go all the way up on the modulation on the VCF, and I go to LFO 1, which is this one, I'm gonna get that modulation. So we are doing something like this. And by default, again, it's a sine wave. You cannot change that. But what you can change is the speed, how fast, or how slow it goes. Now, the other thing you can do is you can MIDI sync to your DAW tempo. So now it's gonna be synced to your tempo. And notice that you are going to get the divisions, the subdivisions right here. If you go 116, of course, it's going to be much faster. If you go 1.8, it's going to be much slower. So you're just MIDI syncing to your DAW tempo. Pretty simple. Now, the LFO number 2 is a bit more complete, right? Just way more complete. I'm going to go to this one. And the LFO number 2, what it can do the rate. Same thing with the other one. You can MIDI sync, just like, you know, you get with the other one. But what you can do, you can use different waveforms. You have a sine wave, you have a saw, and notice that if I go slower, the motion is just a little bit different. It's kind of a ramp, actually, the saw, and you know, just saw, but it's just kind of a ramping. And the other one is going to be the square, which is an on and off kind of a sound. Right? So far, very simple controls, very standard controls. Then you have the retrigger. So, of course, the LFO, how it works behind the scenes, is that the LFO has a constant motion. It doesn't care what I'm playing or where I'm starting. So if I go and do something like maybe like that, right? I'm going to do something like that. And, or maybe this one. And I'm going to start playing a key. And I'm going to, you know, right here on the keyboard. And I'm going to just play it multiple times, one after the other one. And I go fast. And notice that we are going to get that ramp, of course. But we get it a little bit differently. Now, the LFO doesn't care what we are playing. It just goes and goes and goes. And it's just kind of, you know, creating that modulation. But it doesn't care where we are starting. Now, then you have the retrigger. So this means that every time we press a key, it will retrigger and it will start from the beginning of the waveform, right? Before, we just going and going and going, and it's just not restarting. Now, we do the retrigger on. Now, every time that we hit a key, and notice it's very different now, it's just starting from the beginning of the waveform. So if you just play it many times, right, like that, you're always starting from the beginning. So you're not getting a lot of modulation. Now, this is cool when you're just, you know, pressing and holding if you're maybe using using it at this speed, because we get the full motion right from the start. Now, of course, if you go faster, it will kind of assure you that you always start from the same place. With the other one, you will start kind of on a random place. And you're going to get just different sounds, depends on where the waveform is, or the LFO is. Right, so that's what, the retrigger is going, it means. Now then you have the fade in, and this one is pretty simple. You have it in some synthesizers, but on some other synthesizers, you get the fade in and you get a delay. On this one, you just get a fade in. So when I just press a key, the modulation, and I'm going to go faster on this one, the modulation will start right away, right? And notice I'm doing retrigger in sync. So I hit a key and the modulation starts very fast. I'm going to go there. And maybe I don't want that. I want a little bit of kind of a ramping up on that effect because it's just maybe too aggressive at the beginning. That's what the fade in is going to do. And it's a time value. Notice it says 1 second, 2 seconds. You can go up to 12, which is a lot. So this one, what it will do, it will fade this effect in. And it will take maybe 2 seconds right there to be in full effect. So I'm going to press a key. And it will kind of slowly start until we reach kind of the full modulation. And if I do it really slow, it's gonna be very noticeable. Slowly. And full effect. There we go, full effect. Right, so this is what the fade in means. It's just gonna fade the effect. And it's kind of a ramping, motion. On some synthesizers, what you get a delay control along with the fade. So when you press a key, it's going to delay the execution and then it's going to fade in. This is what you get on Juno, for example. But on this one, you just get the fade. All right, so let's talk about the modulation. So right here, for each different section, you have access to different types of modulations. So on the VCOs, and I'm going to start again from a default patch right there. So for the VCOs, and I'm going to go to the number 1 right now, you can do frequency modulation or you can do pulse width modulation. And you have 3 sound sources, 3 different sources. You can do envelope 1, which is the amp envelope, LFO2 and LFO1, right? LFO2, LFO1. Pretty simple, right? So of course, if you go to, maybe I'm going to go to LFO1 and I go to pulse width, this is going to be modulating the width. Now we get nothing, and it's because we are using a saw. You cannot do pulse width modulation with a saw. You need to go to a pulse. And now we are doing pulse width modulation. The LFO is going to decide in this case how fast it goes. Right, so this is like us doing something like this, for example. Just to give you an example. So you can use the LFO1 or the LFO2, and on this one, you can use the envelope 1, which is the amp envelope. And this one will give you that sound. Let me just provide a very example. Let me go right here. So frequency in this case, well, you can do the pulse width. Now, if you go a lot, you go 100%, it's kind of too aggressive. So you're not gonna get a good sound. So maybe you just need to do a little bit of this. Just like there. And this is still, maybe too much. It's a little bit better, right? Now, of course, you can do frequency modulation, which is going to be the pitch. It's going to modulate the pitch. If I go to LFO1, we get that behavior, right? It's just modulating the pitch. Now, with the envelope, it's just... You're slowly ramping up, then going down and, having full sustain. I can go all the way down in the sustain. We're going to get that sound, of course. Now, the thing is that this one is connected to the envelope number 1, pre-wired to the envelope number 1, which is the amp. So whatever we do right here, we are also modifying the amp of the synthesizer, which is the volume that goes out. And sometimes that sucks. So, what you can do on the oscillator number 2 is a little bit different. And I'm going to go back to default. So on the oscillator number 2, you can do the same thing. You can do pulse width modulation with an LFO1, LFO2. You can do frequency modulation with an LFO1 and LFO2. But notice that you get an envelope too. So now you can use this envelope. Maybe you're not using it. So now you can use the envelope number 2 to modulate the frequency of this one. So if I go to right here, I'm going to do pretty much the same thing we did previously. And I'm gonna go right there and maybe go to a saw. Why not? Now, maybe you're thinking, okay, so why do we get different sources? You know, why do we get one and then we get two right here? Well, this is really cool. Again, remember the sync. So if I go to sync, now, of course, the oscillator number 1, it's the master, and the 2 is the slave. So by doing this, we can use this envelope to frequency modulate and get that cool sound we get with sync. Now, in the right side, something I didn't mention, maybe I forgot, is the output section. So you can go, of course, on level, and you can go soft clipping. And if you go really loud, right, like this, the synthesizer is not going to be that loud. Now, it's going to be a little bit loud, of course. Now, this is loud, and I'm going to control this on post, of course. Now, if you lower the volume on maybe your DAW, if you're using on the DAW, this is clipping the signal. So it sounds loud, but it's just clipping it. So if you go up, you're going to enter in kind of the soft clip mode. Now, if you don't if you don't turn it on, it's just going to go really loud, right? So I'm going to just double click and leave it right there. You can do a little bit of overdrive. Of course, you can turn it off or you can turn it on. And this is just going to give you a little bit of overdrive, which is, you know, which with the sync, it sounds really cool. Let me do it with my keyboard. Right, it's a really cool sound. Of course, you can do a little bit of chorus. And you could do a little bit of delay. Now, if I just disable the mid sync for now, you know, the sync, oscillator sync, it's just going to sound very differently. And if I go back to, you know, having the same frequency, now it sounds very differently. Let me disable the modulation. Now, it sounds very cool still, but we lose that, you know, kind of a lead-ish tone. So that's what the oscillator sync gives us. It's kind of that lead-ish tone. Now, of course, when you're in sync, and you get this, of course, this cool sound, as you modify the frequency, you're going to get different timbres. And right now we are using the envelope to do this, but if you wanted to, you can use the LFO1 or the LFO2 if you wanted to. And you're going to get that, you know, really cool sound. I'm going to go back to default, and we have one more to go, which is going to be, of course, the modulation. Then we get right here for the VCF. And on this one, you know, you can do the envelope 2. We already kind of talked about this. If you go down, and you can use the envelope number 2 to provide a little bit of modulation. If I, you know, do something like that and a little bit of resonance, you are going to be modulating the frequency. We can go positive. This is going to, of course, give us that wow effect. Now, if we go really aggressive on the modulation, it's just sometimes it's going to be a little bit too much. So you need to kind of find the sweet spot right here. Now, the cool thing is that you can go in negative mode. Now, if I go to the other way, it's going to be negative. So if I just leave the settings we have right now with the envelope 2, I'm going to get that sound, which is not that cool. Now, of course, this one, what it will do, instead of going down and up and then down with the envelope, we're going to go the other way. We're going to start up, and then we're going to go down, and then we're going to go up because we are going on negative. So it's going kind of in reverse, let's say. Now, you're going to need to handle the decay. If I go all the way up on the sustain, we're going to get that sound, which is not a cool sound. I mean, depends on what you want to do, but... Now, the sustain right here is what it's creating this. If I go all the way down to sustain, we are getting that sound, which is going down and then up again. But the sustain is going to kind of make us stay at some point. Right. So the same thing with the modulation, you know, with the LFO, you can go on positive or you can go negative. It's not going to change a lot, depends on the modulation and the LFO, right? Notice that there's not a lot of change right there. But that's it. That's what you can do with the modulation. It's a pretty, kind of a pretty simple synthesizer in what it can do, pretty basic. Now we can extend all of this when we reach to the advanced section. Because, again, the synthesizer is very simple, it's very basic in what it can do in terms of modulation. It could be enough for creating classic sounds, it's just good sounds. But if you want to create more ambient sounds or other type of sounds, or crazy sounds, let's call it crazy, you're going to need to go to the advanced and you're going to be able to achieve that. The advanced section is very, very cool. So I'm going to go to a default patch right now, and we're going to talk about something we didn't discuss, which is the sub oscillator. If I go all the way down and I go all the way right here, maybe right here in the middle, I'm just going to be getting this sub. Now on the sub, you can of course choose the different waveforms. And in this case, you can do square. You know, we already got that from the VCO1 and VCO2. You can do a saw, which is something that we already get. But then you can do a sine wave because this is a sub, right? And you can go -1, of course, -1 octaves, or -2. And again, this is something that you can blend with your other oscillators just to get something else out of this. Let me do something like that. Now, maybe sometimes the sub is going to be a little bit too much, so you're going to need to find again the sweet spot right here. And different waveforms will give you different subs, of course. I'm going to go really low on this one and maybe use a saw. So every time that you create a sound, and I find this funny, when you work with the main panel without using the advanced section, everything that you do right here, or every sound that you try to create, will sound vintage. By default, it will just it's impossible to not get a vintage kind of a sound or vibe out of this synthesizer. It's just, you know, the way it is. And again, it's just funny because these controls, you can find them on a lot of modern synthesizers. And but the disposition of how everything works and of course the limitations that you get right here will, you know, kind of let you create this vintage vibe sounds very quickly, which is maybe why, you know, we get the plugin and we are using it right now. Okay, so we are going to go back to a default patch. I'm going to go over there, and then we have this section, which is the Arpeggiator, and then the Portamento and the tune. We're going to talk about that in a second. But then the Arpeggiator is just, you know, very basic. This is the very basic of Arpeggiator. And the way it works is that by default, it's off. When I turn it on, as soon as you press a key, it's just going to start, right? It's just going to start triggering or doing the arpeggio. Now, you can, of course, MIDI sync. For now, it's off. And now it's, of course, on. And you can go in, you know, subdivisions right here. Maybe I'm going to go to 116. If I press the key. Now, of course, right now it depends on what you want to do. Maybe I want to do a little bit of resonance. Maybe it's too much. I'm going to go there. And then, of course, you need to change the envelopes. And maybe something like that. There we go. Much better. So, of course, this is an arpeggiator. If you make a chord, it's going to go through the chord. I'm making it try it. Notice, look at the keyboard at the bottom. I'm playing this one, I'm playing this one, and I'm playing this one, which is a C minor. Now, in order to have the arpeggiator go through the three keys, go through the triad, I need to hold the keys. So as soon as I release the keys, it's just going to die. Now, what you can do, you can go to hold, and it's going to hold it for you. Now, I'm not playing anything. I have my hands completely free. It's just going to hold it for you. Now, of course, you can go faster, or you can go slower. Pretty simple stuff. Let me just do something like that. And then what you can do, of course, right here, you can go up, which is the order. It's going 1, 2, 3, and then starting all over again, 1, 2, 3. Or you can go down and it's going to start up and then go down. It's doing 1, then 2, and then 3. Now then you have the other one, which is up and down. It's going to go up and down. So pretty standard controls. And then you have the random, which is going to be random. Right? Let me change it right there. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the first one. It's going to go up, right? Just up. And then you get this controls. So these are, it's going to be kind of the octaves. And this is going to kind of grab whatever you're doing and take it and repeat it again 1 octave up. So right now, I'm doing this triad, right? And I'm going to play it again. And look at the keyboards, 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3. I'm just playing that. If you're on 1, you're just going to go and do the arpeggiator, the arpeggio on that triad, on that octave. If I do 2, it's going to take the same thing we were doing right here, play it where we are playing this, and then taking the same thing and going to play it 1 octave up. So now it's doing 1, 2, 3, then 1, 2, 3. And then starting all over again. And it's because we are doing 2. It's 2 octaves, 1 octave and 2 octaves. You can do the same thing with 3, but now it's going to be 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, and 3, and then 1, 2, and 3. Right? And you can do the same thing with 4 octaves. Now, of course, it's going to be much longer. It's doing this octave, this octave, this octave, and then this one. Right? So pretty standard controls. Now, I'm going to go back to default. So at the end of the day, the arpeggiator is very simple, but you can extend it. You can extend some of the features we get right here and get really cool out of the box sounds with the advanced section. Okay, so I'm going to go back to a default patch. I'm going to start right here, and we're, going on a very fast pace because it's a very simple panel. Now, of course, this is going to get a little bit more challenging when we get right here, but still, this is going to be very simple. I'm going to show you how. So right here at the bottom, you get the mono and then the poly. So this can be a monophonic instrument, 1 key at the time, but then you can do poly. So it means that you can make a triad, just like, we've been doing. Now, one thing that you cannot do on this synthesizer is just to, make unison. Now, you can go right here and modify the amount of polyphony that you can do. You can go up to 32. But if you go to mono, you cannot do all unison, or at least I just couldn't find a way, which is weird. With most of the synthesizers you get on with Arturia, you can do unison. It's something they add, but in this one, couldn't do it, couldn't find it. So I guess and I couldn't find it on the manual as well. There's no indication that we can do unison. So I'm just gonna assume that we cannot do it. So that's it, And then you have the tune control, but this is gonna go sharp or it's gonna go flat. You don't have a 24, dBs going up, 24 semitones going up or down. You don't get that. It's just a fine tune, or more than tune. And then you have your portamento, which is gonna be your glide control. Now, for now, I'm just gonna go and disengage or just turn off everything you have right here. So the portamento is the glide control or the slide control. Now, if I go all the way up, of course, this is going to do the slide or glide to that key. Now, if I go here, notice it's remembering that I play that key, so it's not doing that glide anymore, right? It's just not doing it. And the way that this works on this synthesizer and on some other synthesizers, you get a lot more options for the portamento, not on this one. If I hit a key, whatever all frequency the synthesizer is going to remember that, and then it's going to glide from this frequency to the next one, right? So if I'm on this C and I press a high, kind of a C, this one right here, it's going to go all the way there. But it's traveling from here all the way right here. And there's that, it's not doing it. And if I go down, then it's going to do it. And if I do this one, the motion is going to be very close because the notes are very close. The frequencies are very close to each other. Right. Of course, this can be really slow. Or, go all the way up. It's going to be really slow. I mean, really slow. Now, one thing that is happening, maybe you didn't notice, I'm gonna go and do something like this and go all the way down. And I'm going to go slow now. So it means that if I play high key, it's going to take a long time to reach from the low to the high, right? So if I press the keys going, and I kind of release the key, I'm not pressing anything, and the sound dies. But if I press it again, it remembers the last position or where we left off. So if I press again, it's gonna keep traveling from where it was until it reaches the, this frequency. So that, that's how the Portamento works on this synthesizer. And like I told before, on some other synthesizers, you have many options to use your Portamento. On this one, it just works that way, and that's what you get, and be happy with that. And the last thing that we can cover on this panel is going to be the pitch, which is going to be, the pitch mod. I'm going to go right here. We can go up, or we can go down, and then you have the modulation that right now is not going to do anything. But when you go to a default patch, by default, it's going to do a vibrato. And this is because it's kind of like that on the modulation section. Notice it says mod wheel and then vibrato LFO 1. So we are done with the main panel. Now we need to talk about the advanced section. So let's talk about the advanced section. Of course, the synthesizer, it's very simple and it can do very simple things. It's not a synthesizer that you can do a lot with the main panel, just like we discussed earlier. And without going any further, for example, if you want to do a BCF a frequency, if you want to do a little bit of modulation, you can with the envelope number 2. That's totally cool. You can do it. But if you want to do modulation with the envelope number 2 and the envelope and the LFO number 1 or the LFO, you cannot do it. You just cannot do it. You just can pick only one. Now, of course, this is just the way it is, and we love for that. But on the advanced section, you can. So I'm going to start again, always from a default patch. And if you go to advanced section, you're going to find some options. And for now, I'm just going to turn this off, and I'm going to go to this modulation section. And notice that by default, you do get some kind of examples right here. And you get the mod wheel, which is going to do the vibrato. Now, for now, I'm just going to go off to everything, and I'm going to kind of reset everything so we can start right from the beginning. So this is going to be very simple. What you have is a source and a destination. And in between, you have the amount. So the source is going to be what will be modulating something. And the destination is going to be what is going to be modulated. So if I need to create an example, let's say I'm going to go right here, cut the frequencies, and I'm maybe using a saw on the oscillator number 1. And I'm going to do a little bit of attack, maybe a little bit of decay, and half sustain. So maybe I'm going to go up on the resonance, and I'm going to be using the envelope number 1, and I'm going to go full on the modulation, right? And I'm using a low pass. So we get that classic wow sound. Right? So pretty simple sound, but maybe I want to do a little bit more. So right here, what I want to do, I want to use an LFO and move the frequency as well. But at the same time, keep that envelope too. So that's why you get the modulation section, is the modulation matrix. So I can go and select the source, whatever we have available. We don't have a lot, but we do have something. I'm going to go and pick the LFO 1. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to say, I want to go and modulate the VCF frequency. And now we are doing both things, modulating it with the envelope 2 and then the LFO 1 that we have right here. Now, of course, you need to provide an amount. If not, nothing is going to happen, right? So I'm going to provide some value. And now we are doing both things. We are doing envelope and LFO. Now from the matrix, and of course you can go all the way up, and it's just going to be much more aggressive, much aggressive. And you can go in negative values, depends on whatever source and whatever destination you're using. In this case, I'm just going to leave it right there, something, And you can do some other things that you cannot do from the main panel. Let's say that, for example, I want to go and do the aftertouch, Right now, I'm using the key steps so I can do aftertouch. So maybe I want to modulate the resonance, something that we cannot do from the main panel. So we'll go right here and select the VCF resonance. And I'm going to go all the way so you can really hear this. So if I press softly, and that's the resonance, I'm going to go and just play a different key. And now I'm going to push it harder to do the aftertouch. And notice it's doing it. And it's just responding to the aftertouch, something that you cannot do from the main panel. So let's say that instead of just maybe, I don't know, maybe doing the aftertouch, I'm going to go right here and I'm going to use the mod wheel, right? And if you don't remember what the mod wheel is, this one, right? So right now it's all the way down. And what I can say, I'm going to go right here and say that the mod wheel is going to do something. So I want to go and do the, the VCO number 1 and 2, pulse width modulation. Why not? And I'm going to go to pulse and to pulse on VCO2 and VCO1. And by default, remember that we are kind of a detuning in sense. So we have a kind of a bigger sound. So now the mod wheel will do pulse width modulation. I'm going to go and do a little bit right here. Maybe I'm going to go and do that. And of course, now we can control that pulse width modulation with the mod wheel. I'm going to go right here and do it manually with the mouse so you can see it. And maybe, let's say that I want to, maybe this is too much. Maybe let's choose a different thing, like doing the frequency modulation, something like that. Why not? All right, so super cool. Now, the cool thing with the mod wheel is that you can do several things at the same time. Let's say that we want to do the pulse width modulation. I want to move I want to change the width, right? But I also want to do something else, like, for example, changing the LFO speed, right? So I'm going to go to maybe the LFO number 1, and I'm going to say the LFO 1, which we are using right here at the top, is going to be modified by the mod wheel. So when we move the mod wheel, we are going to be modulating the pulse width modulation, the pulse width of the 1 and 2. And at the same time, we are making the LFO 1 speed go faster. So if I go and play something, and I move with the mouse, we are doing both at the same time. Right, so right here you can do things that you cannot do, in real life with the real synthesizer or with the main panel, and that's the whole idea. And you can do up to 8. So I'm going to go back to a default patch, and we are going to turn this off, and we are going to talk about the keyboard follow. So notice that you have different spots, but you can do different things. And this one is a very special kind of a thing. It's something that you don't get on at all. A lot of synthesizers and a lot of the Arturia products. And with this one, this is like an extended keyboard control. And you can select which keys are going to do something and which other keys are going to do something else. And I'm going to give you an example. This is kind of the best way of learning this. Now, you need to, of course, select whatever right here you're trying to do. And you're going to get some things and some example. So this one, it's going on the VCF frequency, which is this one, right? So what we can do, and notice that if I play and if I turn it off and play a key, it's going to tell you which keys you're playing. So this will provide an instruction to whatever it is that you're doing right here. And you can select a lot of things, whatever param. You're going to say, okay, so if I go maybe above C3, it's going to be brighter. And if I go below, it's going to be, darker. That's what we are doing pretty much. So if I enable the VCF, you need to provide some value right here because this is relative to whatever value you have right here. So now if I go and play a low key below C3, it's just going to sound darker. If I play a key above C3, it's going to be, brighter. So now the idea is that, in this case with the VCF is that you can have a fundamental tone right here at the bottom that sounds a lot, much darker, and you can adjust it right here. Sounds much darker, but it's not in the way of the high frequencies, high pitch. So you can have a fundamental tone and then, you know, just play a melody right there at the top. Now, right now we are doing it with a frequency, but you can do whatever you want right here. We can go and maybe enable the resonance. And on this one, we are going to do the same thing. The ones below C3 are going to be doing something, or maybe they're going to be kind of a darker or maybe on the same spot. But the other ones, the higher keys, are just going to go up in resonance. And again, you need to provide value. This is kind of a relative. We're going to do the same thing. The lower ones, you know, they stay right there. But the higher ones... Let me just bring a little bit of chorus and a little bit of delay. It's just going to sound a little bit better. Right? So that's what we want. We want to kind of split the keyboard and do something else. Now, of course, you can do some other things, maybe do something like that. And some other keys are going to be darker. Some other keys are going to be brighter. It depends on what you want to do. And notice that all the things that you can do right here. And you can, of course, you know, maybe if I go right there, I can go and say maybe the LFO amount, you know, something, you know, a little bit more creative. So if I go over there to the LFO amount, we are not doing LFO. I'm going to go and select the LFO. So when we press a key, let's do modulation. We are doing LFO. But now we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to go and say that the C3 keys are going to go full in modulation amount, and the other ones, the lower keys, are going to stay without modulation. We're still doing a little bit of modulation, but if I play the higher keys, it's just much more aggressive, right? And there you go, right? So you go from getting very kind of a standard sounds with the main panel to get some other sounds that you cannot get, you know, with the main panel. That's the whole idea. And you can do this with modulations and the keyboard follow, and you know, you can get a vast amount of sounds. There's really creative sounds. Okay, so let's talk about the 8-voice programmer. And this is, you know, the name is just a little bit weird. You know, I don't know if it's an 8-voice programmer. It's just, you know, maybe not the right name, but, you know. So with this one, it's something that you can use without the arpeggiator, of course. But in my opinion, it's something that sounds really cool with the ARP. Because the ARP lets you hold the keys. Now, this one, it's like an 8-step sequencer, but it's a bit different. It has the same idea, but it's a little bit different. And I'm going to try now to modify some of the things that we get right here, so you can have the same at home, you can get the same sound. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the modes, because the modes are really important. So you get a lot. So I'm going to start with forward. And by just, you know, going to the keyboard and pressing a key, you're going to see that something is going on right there. You know, it's some kind of a moving. So every time we press a key, it's going to move on to the next one. Notice going 8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's how it works. It's going to move every time that you press a key to the next kind of a step. Now, what's the fun in this one? So right here, you can go to each section. For example, I'm going to go to the VCO1 and I'm going to leave this as default because it sounds super cool. If I go to this, we already have an instruction by default on the default patch. So if I go and do the same, this is going to modify the course, the frequency of the VCO1 and the 2, and we are going to get kind of a sequence. But it's kind of changing the frequency. We are going to get that. Now, of course, what I've told you that it's really useful when you use with the arpeggiator is because right now we just kind of need to press a key in order to move forward. If that's the case, if you like that, that's fine. It sounds cool. I'm going to provide a little bit of overdrive, a little bit of chorus, and a little bit of delay, and it's going to sound cooler. Right? That's just a different sound. So now if I go to the arpeggiator and just hold it, and I press a single key, we're going to hear that effect. I'm going to go there. There you go. And I'm just pressing one key. Now the arpeggiator is just holding this key for me. So now, of course, you can change everything that is right here, and notice it's in semitones. Now we can, of course, modify some of the things we have right here just to get the sound we want. All right. Now you can do all the things. For example, let's say that I want to go to the, I don't know, the frequency. I'm gonna go to this one, and notice that you already have an instruction, but from factory. I'm gonna enable it, and it's modulating the frequency on each step. That's how it works. Pretty simple, right? Told ya. Now if I go maybe to resonance, we can maybe go up right here. And you're gonna get something else, right? Really cool sounds. Sounds super cool. Now, of course, what you can do right here, you can skip steps. That's why you get the on and off. So let's say that I'm gonna go to maybe this one, and I'm gonna just turn off this one, and it's gonna skip steps. And of course, this will be applied to all the other modulations. And it will go faster because you don't have 8 steps, you have less. Now you have, 5, 4. And you can just play around with just to get different sounds. So then you have, let me do the panning. Why not? I'm gonna go to the panning. And I'm gonna do something to the left, something to the right, and that kind of a motion. Cool sound, right? And we did nothing, just turning on and just doing hold. That's all. Now then you have the modes, and the modes are really important. Now the forward, it means that every time that, we play a key, and for now I'm just gonna turn it off. So the forward means we play a key, and it will just advance to the next step. Right? That's what it means. But we need to play a key. That's why the hold, it's just helping us a lot, because it's just kind of doing it for us. So I'm gonna do the same. I'm gonna play C. And I'm gonna go to the backwards. So this is gonna, of course, go backwards instead of go forwards, just like the other one. And all of these modes, of course, work with us, pressing a key multiple times. In this case, we are holding. So forward and backwards, pretty self-explanatory. It's just gonna go forwards and backwards. Then you have random. And again, you just, get random. Again, pretty self-explanatory. And then you get the reassign and the forward retrigger. And for this one, I'm gonna need to turn it off. So if you go to the manual, there's no mention to the reassign and the forward retrigger. And that's, how it is. Sometimes your Arturia, it's not very good. They're not very good with manuals. And, that's the way it works. So maybe I'm going to go right here so you can see what's going on there. So I'm going to press a key. I'm going to go right here and maybe do a low C, right? I'm going to press the low key and keep pressing it. And notice that, oh, it's random. So let's go to reassign. If I press the low key, it's on the number 1. And if I press it again, it's on the number 1. So it's not moving like the other ones. It's not going to the next step. It's just not, that's not what it's doing. So the reassign, it works like on some synthesizers, it works with voices. When you have multiple voices, like 12 voices or something like that, or 8 voices in this case, each voice will be kind of be toggled, or it will be reassigned or moved. This is how it works. So if I press one key, let me do no modulation. If I press one key, it's just playing the first one, because it remembers that that's, maybe the voice for the key. Now, if I hold this one and I keep holding and I press a new key, that's going to be the number 2, because that's the second voice. If I press the third one, that's going to be the number 3. Now, if I release and keep pressing 1, everything will be kind of reassigned. So if I press a different key, that's going to be the 2, and that's going to be the 3. So I'm playing 3 keys now. So if I do a number 4, that's going to be the number 4, because I'm holding all the keys. So I'm holding 4 different keys. If I press another one, that's going to be the 5, and then, we get the 6, and so on and on and on. But in order to, move on to the different voices, you're going to need to kind of press and hold. And now one more thing. I'm holding this one, and then I press this one. And look at that right here at the bottom, right here on the keyboard. I'm pressing this one, and I'm pressing this one. I'm going to do 1, and this one is going to be the 2, right? Now, if I release and I keep pressing this one, I'm holding this one. So this is the number 2. If I go to this one, which was the 1, it's gonna still play on the 1. So it's gonna remember what was the the previous voice. That's why it's reassigned, and maybe it's called 8-voice programmer. It's maybe, but there's no mention to this on the manual, which is just weird. And then you have the forward retrigger. Now the forward retrigger works like the forward, and if you don't remember, I'm gonna go over there, and every time we press a key, it's gonna toggle through the different steps, right? Now the other one is just kind of the same, but it's gonna be a little bit different. Now, if I do the same, notice it's just not doing the same. If I press a key and hold, press and release, not doing the same, staying always in 1. So this one, what it does, if I hold one key and then I place something at the top, it's going to be moving through the different voices. But I need to hold the key in order for this to happen. You can get, really cool sounds with this. Right? So that's, what it's just going to do. It's just useful. It depends on what you want to do, of course. But in my opinion, if you go just this one and hold, it's just amazing, right? Just like a sequencer. Right? So that's it. It's pretty much what the synth can do. Okay, so that's it. It's just a pretty simple synthesizer capable of just pretty classic sounds. But if you need a little bit more kind of a firepower, or maybe a little bit more, you can go to the advanced section and turn this into whatever you want. That's, my conclusion about this synthesizer. Classic sounds, but with an extended mode. Of course, if you like this and you find this useful, remember, please do subscribe and like, because if no one subscribes and no one likes the videos, why keep on doing it, right? It just makes no sense. And it's free. Just like and subscribe if you like this. And remember to check the Patreon if you can afford it and you want to support what I do, all the things I'm uploading. Go to Patreon, maybe subscribe 1 month, and that's just going to be enough help for me. All right, so see you on the next one, and have a nice one.